Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic. I'm Neil Mack, the author, and I want to depart a little bit from our normal range of topics. We normally discuss fantasy fiction themes, which will help inspire you to write great fantasy fiction. I thought it would be sensible, really, to discuss your author expectations and how to manage those expectations. And so this is going to be a short presentation, but it's going to take up the whole podcast, so be ready for it. What are your author expectations? Before this global emergency, I used to attend quite a few conferences and seminars and workshops during the year, and these were aimed at authors and creative writers. They were great places to mingle with like-minded people and to learn a few new tricks of the trade and to get rejuvenated and revitalised. And I always felt that I came back from conference, as we call it, recommitted to my project, re-engaged and reawakened. I wanted to be a better author after I'd been. Most of these events, and I did miss them last year, I really did, but at most of these events they set up a table, normally in the lobby or the foyer, where budding authors can place their new book, along with some promotional materials such as bookmarks and pens and business cards, in the hope that somebody will pick up the book and possibly buy it. And normally, after taking out my book and putting it neatly on the table and sticking out a few cards, I then routinely find a seat nearby where I can observe the table. The idea is that somebody will pick up my book, they'll make promising facial expressions, I'm hoping they'll smile and nod at an amusing point in the book, at which point I will stroll over to them and I'll introduce myself and I'll say, "Hi, I'm the author. If you like that book, you can take it. And also take a bookmark." Of course, 99.9% of the people who come to that table do not pick up my book. They don't even look at it as they scan the table. Is my book that bad? Have I gone that wrong with my cover art? Is the title of my book so objectionable? I frown. Then I nod to the people who sit on my left, and I nod and smile to the people who sit on my right. And then the penny drops. The people who sit on my left and sit on my right, in fact all the people sitting near me, are author entrepreneurs. They are the business creatives like me, and in fact they're my major competitors if you want to see the world as a contest between rivals. And they are watching the same table that I'm watching. They're watching too, to see if anybody picks up their book. And that means, therefore, that the people who are at the table are not author entrepreneurs. They're not business creatives. Well, if they're not, who are they? Or what are they looking for? Well, I think they're scanning the table for some other kind of material. Possibly they're looking for freebies. They just want to pick up as many bookmarks and pens as they can. I also think they're probably most likely looking for books that have the same distinctive qualities as their theoretical project. Because I guess these are the people who, and bless them for this, they're there for the first ever time. This is their first ever conference. Or, if it's not their first time, then they've strayed into this wild and strange and curious world, a world they will never know and never fully understand, and it'll probably be the first and last conference they've ever gone to. Or, this is also a possibility, they are hucksters and they're looking for nest egg seniors, and I'll explain what they are in a moment. They're looking for nest egg seniors to fleece. At the last major independent author conference that I attended in 2019, the keynote speaker began her very inspirational speech with 4 words. She said, "What do you want? What do you want?" She gazed at the seated delegates with an inquiring and, I thought, somewhat critical eye. And then she explained in a little bit more detail. "Do you want to be famous for your work? Do you want your book to be on the bestseller list? Do you want to be an award-winning author? Do you want your book to make you rich? Do you want a publishing contract? Do you want to see your book on the shelves of the high street bookstores? Do you want writing to be an enjoyable and a fascinating hobby? Do you want to write your reminiscences for your grandchildren? Do you want to tell people you are an author?" Then she gave us the bad news. These expectations are not compatible with one another. If you came to the conference expecting the moderators and the speakers and the other experts would put you on a path to all of these expectations, then you'll be disappointed. Just choose one, she said. Choose one from that list. If you choose one, then it might be a deliverable expectation and you will probably not be disappointed. But you can't have more than one because one will cancel the other out. Now, I've been attending these types of events for 10 years, and that's 3 or 4 a year for 10 years, so I've done a lot. And during that time, I've figured out what kind of person attends these sort of events. And this is how I describe them. Strugglers. These are the people like me, the author entrepreneurs and the business creatives who are struggling, but they're looking for advice and they're looking for new angles and they're looking for new opportunities. They're looking for ways to engage with like-minded people. The next group is the newbies. You have to start somewhere. Everybody has to go to their first ever indie author conference, and all authors have to write their first book. The next group is the dabblers. These ones go to conferences regularly. I see them at quite a few conferences, but they never actually start their project. They're not active writers. They never finish a project. They just dabble along. And then they're the wizards. These are the remarkably skilled wonder workers who are most likely presenting at the conference, or they've been invited along by an illustrious pal who happens to be one of the speakers, or they're reconnoitring before a speaking engagement either at that conference next year or for a similar conference that they've been booked for. And then there's the disorientated group. Now, I don't mean to be harsh, but why did these guys even bother to come? They invariably look confused and vague. Of course, they're utterly baffled by all the jargon. And then the final group is the nest egg seniors. These are the kindly and very nice gentlefolk who just want to write their memories for their grandchildren. I have heard the words, "I just want to write a book of fairy poems for my grandson," 100 times over. In fact, they usually yell this out during a lecture on search engine optimization or international ISBN registration. And of course, there will be clever hucksters in the audience watching and waiting for these type of guys, because they are the preferred victim of the various vanity presses, also known as the full-service publishing houses. To be completely honest, it's a match made in heaven, because the people at the vanity presses will take a stained manuscript, they will give it a makeover, and then they'll print a dozen or so copies and deliver them to the appreciative customer. Of course, the customer in this case is the author, not the readers. And the customer might think that he or she has gotten away with it very lightly if they just gave up a few £1,000s or dollars for the service. But everyone's happy. The customer can say that he or she published a book, the grandson can put the book on his shelf and never read it, and the vanity publisher will at least be able to pay another month's mortgage. From the beginning of my author journey, I decided, due to my pecuniary disadvantage, by the way, I decided that in regard to my authoring, I would do everything myself. This admirable DIY ethic is fine, But it does take time. It takes a lot of time to master the several dozen skills that you need if you want to get your head around author entrepreneurship and if you want to be in the game. And you'll need pugnacity too. So I guess now, after 10 years, and yes, I do admit I'm a slow learner, but now after 10 years, I'm at the stage of what psychologists call conscious incompetence. And that's kind of the second step in the 4-step path. And that's after 10 years. After 10 years, I managed to get to level 2. And I guess that's why the keynote speaker that I mentioned earlier asked everyone, what do you want? Because she's right. You can't have everything. Thinking more deeply about her words, I realised that my early aspirations to be rich and to be successful were about as pie in the sky as my inclination was to make my writing hobby just an enjoyable and fascinating pastime. You can't have both. She was right. One cancels the other out. It can't be an enjoyable and a fascinating hobby if you also want to make some money. And you can't be on the bestseller list but also get awards. Many of my author friends, let me tell you, make a 6-figure income each year from their book sales. But you won't find their books on shelves in major stores. Only 1 in a million will ever tick off the complete and entire list that she read out. In England, there's a game show host, and I won't tell you his name because he's a nice guy, and plus I don't want to give him any more publicity than he already has. But he wrote a book during the 2020 lockdown, and he published it. The public service broadcaster who employ him, and it's a non-commercial broadcaster by the way, they never miss an opportunity to advertise and to promote his book. Additionally, he's a frequent guest on various news and entertainment shows where he, of course, plugs his book. And when he's off screen, which is rare, he's on screen about 3 times a night, there are other TV celebrities who will also offer to commend his book for him. Unsurprisingly, his book got into the bestseller list, and now he's worshipped and applauded, not just as a TV quiz show host, but also as a credible author. Not bad, within 1 year. Yes, you might spot some sour grapes, but I'm just trying to be logical. If you want to check off all the expectations on the wish list that the keynote speaker gave, then you'll have to be on TV 3 times a day, every day, and you'll have to have lots and lots and lots of TV personality friends to plug your book for you. So what are your author expectations? Let's go through them again. Do you want to be famous for your work? Well, if you do, then I suggest you start thinking about writing 3-book or 5-book series. Write for market, write a lot, write fast, because you're probably going to be minimum, I would say, needing to write 3 books a year, possibly up your game to 5 books a year. Write speculative fiction and focus on building a fan base. It's going to be full-time work. Or do you want your book to be in the bestseller list? One of my books got into the bestseller list. When I say the bestseller list, there are several bestseller lists, and even those are broken down into subgroups, and then those subgroups are broken down into even smaller subgroups. One of my books got into a bestseller list for a couple of weeks, and that novel sold only about 700 copies to make the list. So about 700 copies, I was in the bestseller list. And later, of course, it fell off the list. There are several lists, and not all lists are the same. And the trick here is to write to niche. The trick here is to specialise, go deep. In fact, it's the complete opposite of the one above. It's the complete opposite of wanting to be famous for your work. You must look for the opposite of mainstreaming. Now, your book doesn't have to be avant-garde, but your book must appeal to a very narrow audience. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but what you're aiming for here is limited appeal. If you get your book to enough people in a niche market, it will get to the bestseller list. It will get to the top of the bestseller list, and it will possibly and probably stay there. Or do you want to be a prize winner? If you want to be a prize winner, write a great book, get it edited properly, and spend some money on a brilliant cover. And incidentally, you should probably be doing that for all of the above expectations, but hey-ho. But here's the big difference between you and everyone else. Don't worry about niches, don't worry about the mainstream. Spend all your time submitting your work to writing and literature competitions, and there are several hundred of them, and it will take you as long as you have. But eventually, you'll win something. Trust in yourself, and you'll be a prize winner. Or do you want your book to make you wealthy? Well, there are several schemes that will help you achieve that goal. Many books and many courses, some online, some offline, some are snake oil, some are not, will help and guide you. But understand that you will have to put in lots of time understanding the ins and outs of things, but especially of Amazon advertising, and you'll need to have some capital to play with. Now, I know indie authors who spend about $1,000 a month on advertising, but they are achieving sales worth in excess of 6 figures a year. Of course, you will never find these authors on the shelves of your local bookstore, and you won't see their names on bookseller lists, and of course they won't win any prizes. You won't even know their names, but they are very prosperous, they're happy, and they live very elegant lifestyles. So their books did make them wealthy. So there is a way of doing it, and it can be done. Or do you want to get a publishing deal? Well, if you want to get a publishing deal, then write a splendid book, have it edited properly, and get it done professionally. Get the editing done professionally. Get yourself a copy of the Writers and Artists Yearbook or similar, and compile a list of literary agents who will accept submissions from people like you with books like yours. Don't try to submit your work to somebody who doesn't take science fiction if you write science fiction. Don't try to send your fantasy book to a literary agent who only deals with autobiographies. But then after that, you will begin the laborious and the cumbersome route into published authorship. And it will take time and it will take commitment. And these days you'll have to show that you already have a ready-made audience. So you'll need a thriving and a popular presence on social media. If you've got half a dozen followers on Twitter and 25 followers on Facebook, then there's never going to be a literary agent take you now, not nowadays. And be aware, please, that publishing services are not the same as publishers. If you go direct to a publishing service rather than through a literary agent, you won't be getting a publishing deal, you'll just be getting a contract with a vanity publisher, because publishing services is just another name for vanity publishing. And instead you'll know them because they'll come to you rather than you having to find them or you having to jump through hoops to get their attention. They'll come to you. Anybody who comes to you and says, I will publish your book, are going to be publishing services. Or do you want to see your book on shelves in the high street? We can do this. If we go down this route, I advise you that you'll not have much time to make any money from your sales, nor will you be a prize winner, nor will you get onto any bestseller lists. I haven't got time to go into the complexities and the semantics of this right now, but please recognise that you'll be putting a lot of time into it without very good results. Although I'm reasonably certain that you'll probably need to get yourself published via Ingram Spark or some other aggregator or a publishing company that sells books to retail stores. And Ingram Spark, by the way, have some excellent guides that will help you through this very convoluted process. But why? Why do you want to see your book on the shelf in the high street? Why do you want to go down that way? Are you sure it's not just toilet table love? Or do you want your writing to be a pleasant and a fascinating pastime? If so, please don't get into the rat race that authorship has become. Instead, join a local creative writing group, spend some quality time, a great writing weekend away with your newfound friends once they've eased the restrictions. And some of these writers' retreats, for example, are undoubtedly very nice. Meet some pleasant people and enjoy your writing as a recreational pleasure. You might even get a short story or a poem printed in a little anthology or in a privately produced collection, and it will be very nice. But if you decide to fall into one of the other results-orientated categories that I've already mentioned, then your nice little hobby is likely to turn into a frenzied and an uncontrollable burden. So please don't step into that combative world, a combative world of free enterprise authorship, because it comes with focus and it comes with strain. So please don't be tempted. If you want to write for pleasure and as a pastime, don't get into the rat race. Or do you want to write reminiscences for your grandchildren? If you do, find yourself a fantastic full-service self-publishing company. Someone who you would like to work with for a year or more, someone who offers you excellent authoring services. They will take your manuscript and they will turn it into a book that you can put onto your shelf. And they will print some more books for your friends and your family. Of course, this will cost you a few thousand. But if this is all you need, it's doubtless the smartest route to take, and it will be the least painful for you in the long run. But if you do go down this route, and why shouldn't you, please remember that you won't become a bestseller, and you won't be easily able to take your book into a high street bookstore, and it's almost certain you'll never become rich from it. And I'm sorry about that. I think the last on the list is, would you like to tell people you're an author? Now, when I tell people I'm an author, they almost always ask a question. They say, have you written anything I've ever heard of? They won't know this, but let me tell you, there were over 1.4 million new books published on Amazon in 2018. There's been more, much more, since the lockdown. That's 1.4 million new books, don't forget, on top of the books that already exist. Amazon is estimated to have about 19% of the total book market. So I suppose they sell about 37 million books a year. Approximately 675 million printed books are sold in the United States each year, and 190 million or so printed books are sold in the United Kingdom. And that's not even ebooks. Ebooks and audiobooks generate billions more in global revenue. Amazon's Kindle Unlimited ebooks paid out more than $250 million to indie authors in 2019. And I got those figures from self-publishing-advice, all one word.org. So how can anyone have ever heard of you? You, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are a grain of sand on a very shingly beach. I remember my first ever book. It was exciting. I waited a few weeks for the publishers to pick me up, or to be selected for a Booker Prize, or to be offered a deal for a feature film. But then I understood the truth. My book had disappeared into the nebulous cosmos of book space. Yes, you can see it if you use a long-range telescope. You can make out a faint glint at the very ends of the antholoxia, which is the literary universe, by the way. But my book is hardly what you might call a bright star in the bookish galaxy. Sometimes those same people will ask, have I ever heard of you? They often ask this in quite unvarnished tones, by the way. And of course the answer is no. No. Can I get your book in the high street, they may then say. And of course the answer is yes. They can get your book in the high street. You can buy my book in the high street. But of course they don't really mean that, do they? When they compiled that question in their mind, they didn't mean, if I go into a shop and I have your ISBN number with me, could I order your book? What they actually meant when they asked that question was, can I see your book on display in Barnes & Noble or Waterstone's front window? And if that's the type of question that you want to answer with a yes, and that's the kind of question that drives you, and who am I to disagree with that, then you should go down the Ingram Spark route that I've already suggested. But be clear, if you want to tell people you're an author, anticipate some disappointment. And meanwhile, while you're worrying about that, all the other authors will be busy selling books in batches. They'll be working their way to award-winning glory. They'll be sending off inquiry letters to agents. They'll be working on their ad campaigns. And they'll be preparing their books to maximise sales and to get them read, possibly just by friends and family. But they'll all be working on their expectations. What are your author expectations? Just choose one path and stick to it. Good luck with that. Let me know how you get on. Let me know if you agree or disagree, or what your experiences are, and tweet me at Neilmach, Neilmach, all one word. Come back next week with some more interesting stuff to do with fantasy fiction. But good luck with your writing for this week. See ya.